Welcome to LobbyComply Pod from State and Federal Communications, your source for lobbying, compliance, ethics, campaign finance, and election news from across the country.
My name is Jim Sedor. I'm the manager of news services at State and Federal Communications. I produce News You Can Use, which is a compilation of news on ethics, lobbying, campaign finance, elections, and procurement from across the United States and around the world. This podcast features two of the most egregious examples of wrongdoing in the past year. The first case is from Illinois, where a federal jury convicted the so-called ComEd 4 defendants on all charges related to a conspiracy to bribe former House Speaker Michael Madigan to win his support for Commonwealth Edison's legislative agenda in Springfield. Madigan friend Michael McLean, former ComEd CEO Ann Pramaggiore, ex-ComEd lobbyist John Hooker, and Jay Doherty, who worked as a lobbyist for ComEd for 30 years and served as president of the Chicago City Club, were convicted of arranging for jobs, contracts, and money for Madigan allies in an illegal bid to influence a speaker. Madigan has been called the most powerful state lawmaker in the country. His approval was needed for any legislation to advance. 5 Madigan allies were paid $1.3 million by ComEd over 8 years. The money was paid through intermediaries, including Doherty's consulting firm, but the men did little or no work for the utility. In return, Madigan used his influence to help ComEd score a series of legislative victories that not only rescued the company from financial instability, but led to record-breaking profits. Defense attorneys insisted prosecutors concocted a dark theory out of what was honest legal lobbying. But jurors heard recordings made by Fidel Marquez, a one-time ComEd executive who was working undercover for the FBI. He recorded the defendants discussing the arrangement in which Madigan allies were paid through Doherty's firm. Madigan is set to face his own trial on separate indictments that allege the same scheme in addition to others. Commonwealth Edison was charged with bribery, but entered into a deferred prosecution agreement in which the company agreed to pay a $200 million fine and make changes to its oversight policies. If it abides by the terms of the agreement, prosecutors will seek dismissal of the bribery charge. This case shows that establishing a robust compliance policy up front, including for contract lobbyists, can mitigate or prevent serious consequences for a company's bottom line and reputation. The second example concerns what has been called the biggest corruption case in the history of Ohio. Former House Speaker Larry Householder was sentenced to the maximum 20 years in prison after being found guilty in federal court of orchestrating a bribery scheme that involved the utility First Energy and more than $60 million in dark money political contributions. U.S. District Court Judge Timothy Black called Householder a bully with a lust for power, whose scheme marked an assault on democracy, the betrayal of everyone in Ohio. Householder, former Ohio Republican Party chairperson Mark Borges, political consultant Jeff Longstreth, and lobbyist Juan Cespedes and Neil Clark were charged with participating in the scheme. Borges was sentenced to 5 years in prison, while Longstreth and Cespedes testified against Householder and faced 6 months each in jail as part of their plea deals. Neil Clark committed suicide after the charges were announced. Householder returned to the Ohio House in 2016 with an eye on becoming Speaker again. Householder flew on a First Energy jet to Donald Trump's inauguration in 2017, and shortly after, corporate checks started flowing to Generation Now, a dark money group set up by Longstreth and financed by First Energy that was under Householder's control. As a social welfare nonprofit, Generation Now was not required to disclose its donors. The dark money from Generation Now was used to advocate for a $1.3 billion bailout for 2 of First Energy's nuclear power plants, and to bankroll a sophisticated campaign to defend the law against an initiative to block it. Generation Now also helped elect candidates loyal to Householder and paid for a term limit effort that could have given Householder another 16 years in control of the House. Ashley Brown, former head of the Harvard Electricity Policy Group, said, "There's a lot of gray areas between an outright bribe and campaign contributions meant to elect someone who might be sympathetic to a company and be expected to at least listen to the company's viewpoints on policy issues." Brown said evidence in the Householder case supported a finding that there was an explicit quid pro quo, that First Energy wanted something very tangible in the form of legislation. First Energy admitted it bribed Householder and Public Utilities Commission of Ohio chairperson Sam Randazzo. Prosecutors charged First Energy with conspiracy in its efforts to bribe government officials in exchange for favorable treatment. In exchange for the company's cooperation, payment of a $230 million fine, forfeiture of another $7 million involved in the bribery plot, and a public admission of guilt, the government will drop that charge. Generation Now pleaded guilty to racketeering. As part of the deal, it will forfeit $1.5 million. Former First Energy Chief Executive Officer Chuck Jones and former company executive Mike Dowling will face trial on state corruption charges in the matter. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to LobbyComply Pod from State and Federal Communications. For more news, visit LobbyComply.com. To learn more about how we can guide you along the road to compliance, visit stateandfed.com.